Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to give folks just a little bit of time to hop on, so sit tight and we will get started in just a minute or two. All right, folks are continuing to trickle in, so I'll just give it another minute and then I promise we'll kick this off. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. For those just joining, thank you so much for being here tonight. VPIRG and VCV are really excited to host tonight's Get Out the Vote training. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be available to rewatch in the next day or two. For those who don't know, my name is Jordan Hayden. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm VPIRG's Democracy Vermont Campaign Director. I'll be emceeing our training this evening, and I am joined by my colleague Josh Ferguson and VCV partner Ford Young. You'll be hearing from them both throughout most of our session together tonight. And we would love to get to know a little bit more about you, so please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and the town that you're calling from. And you can also feel free to include what you're most hoping to gain from tonight's training. So, as folks are typing messages in the chat, I will quickly walk us through tonight's agenda. So, Josh, if you want to move on to the next slide. All right. So first, I'm going to give a quick canvassing overview to really emphasize the importance of getting out there face to face this election season. Then I'll pass it over to Ford to talk about how to craft your unique story. From there, you'll learn about common interruptions and the close strategy. Then we'll put it all into practice with some quick demos. We'll talk about situational awareness and safety and turf management, and then we'll share some useful resources. And bonus, if you're eager to get even more involved, you can join VPIRG Votes and VCV after this call tonight for a quick meeting about candidate endorsements and the unveiling of our Fall Canvas Volunteer Tour. So we will talk more about that at the end of this call because that's a totally separate thing, but it's very exciting and I hope you'll join for that. All right, moving right along to the next slide. Okay, so let's make sure we're all on the same page by covering the who, what, when, where, and why of canvassing. So, who can canvass? Pretty much anybody. Friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, anyone who wants to help spread the word this election season. What is canvassing? It's pretty simple. It's the action of knocking on doors with the intention of educating, engaging, or inspiring action. You attempt to have a conversation with whoever opens up the door, and you can pretty much go any place that has a door and someone on the other side of it. When do we canvass? Well, folks can canvass pretty much whenever they want, but we'll be focused on our Get Out the Vote efforts between now and November 3rd. And why would we want to do that? It's because the midterm elections are just that important. There are contested races all across the state, and this is our opportunity to get out the vote. Midterm elections consistently face low voter turnout, but we cannot let Vermont voters sit this one out. We need everyone at the polls to ensure that our legislature truly represents our people and our values. That's why we do this work, and I really hope you're going to do it with us. So that's just a little bit of context setting for you all. And with that, I'll pass it over now to Ford to dig into this work a bit more deeply.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good evening. I'm Ford with Vermont Conservation Voters. I'm an environmental organizer by training, and I've had the chance to canvass in communities across the country, from Denver to Austin to Ohio, working on a whole host of issues, primarily environmentally focused. Over the years, I've learned that one of the most important skills I can have ready to go when I knock on a door isn't the perfect script or the perfect talking point. It's my story, who I am, and why I'm at the door talking to you. Having a personal story, it makes you more relatable. When you're advocating for an issue, sharing your story can help you connect with others, build trust, and inspire them to get involved. Your story gives people a reason to understand not just what you're advocating for, but why it matters to you. To tell it effectively, paint a picture of why you care about the issue, the experiences that have shaped your perspective, and the challenges you and your community have faced, and why you've chosen to act now. Be honest and specific. One meaningful example or moment can be more powerful than a long explanation. Your story may be unique, but the people you meet at the door may recognize themselves in it too. They may share your experiences, your concerns, your values, even if their path to that issue has been different. When you share your passion and you explain what brought you here, you create an opportunity for people to see the issue through a personal lens and connect it to their own lives. You don't need to have the perfect story. You just need to share what brought you here. Um, when creating your story, I find that's helpful to kind of base it around these four questions in this slide. Why are you canvassing? So, like, what makes this issue personal to you? What motivated you to show up? What experience in your life has prepared you for this effort? So, think about the people, the experiences, and the challenges that have shaped how you see this issue and what brought you to this work. How does canvassing help the moment? So why is it important to have these conversations right here, right now? What are you hoping to accomplish? And then who are you hoping to meet at the door? This is an important one. It can be helpful to think beyond just a voter, just a supporter. Who are your neighbors? What experiences, what values, what concerns might you have in common with them? And then keep your story brief. This doesn't have to be long to be meaningful. Focus on one or two clear things. It's not your entire life story. Remember, you're speaking to someone at the door, should be, you know, 60 to 90 seconds, leaving room for genuine conversation and connection after. So I'm gonna give a little example of a story that I've used at the door before. And then after that, we're gonna take 5 minutes of just individual work time for you guys to take a stab at it too and try drafting your own. So here's mine. When I was at college, I went to school in Eastern Ohio, right in the heart of Appalachian coal country. More so than other college campuses I've seen, my campus was a real bubble. Students didn't interact with the community and vice versa. We were, I thought at the time, quite different, different upbringings, different values, different politics. Just we didn't mix much, and I didn't really see a need for it. Then the 2024 elections came about. It was a big election in Ohio, and I signed up to knock on doors to encourage people to register to vote. Um, Sound familiar? On my first day, I was sent out with a clipboard and nothing like the training that y'all are getting now. They just kind of told me to go. So I was a bit intimidated. It was my first real, efforts to make a real connection to the community around me. I was meeting people who literally lived like a few houses away from where I lived on campus, but whose lives and experiences I knew nothing about. And I'm really glad I took that leap. Those conversations opened my eyes to how much you can learn when you step outside your own bubble and take the time to listen. Most folks would happily chat. I heard different perspectives and really started to feel like I was actually part of the community that I had lived in for 2 years at that point. And that's why I'm here today. I realized that just like when I'm at school, it's easy to find yourself in a bubble here in Vermont too. But that's no way to build a working community. I want to bring that same spirit of showing up to connect with my neighbors at a time when it feels like the wider world is trying to tear us apart, to protect our land, uplift our communities, and work towards a better Vermont for us all. So that's my story. It's brief, it's to the point. I like to think that it humanizes my experience. You know who I am, what's led me there, um, and why it matters. But you didn't come here to hear my story. You came here to learn how to craft your own. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to take 5 minutes. Jordan, I believe you're timing it, and we'll bring us back to attention. And in the meantime, we're here for any questions. As far as guardrails go, like use the questions listed on the slide deck as your guide. You can try to aim for like 1 or 2 sentences per question with the goal for your story to be spoken, and again, less than 90 seconds from start to finish. And we will be available to answer any questions in the meantime you have just in the chat. Thanks, y'all.
All right, I'm going to give folks just one more minute, so wrap up those sentences. I see some action happening in the chat. Feel free to keep popping those in there if you'd like, and we will continue on in just a moment. All right, we're at time, so Ford, I will pass it back over to you. Or Josh, whoever wants to take it.
I will take it from here. Thank you, Ford and Jordan and folks for taking that time to think about your story. I'm here to talk first about our close method, but you should probably get to know me first. I'm Josh Ferguson, VPIRG's lead field organizer, and my background in canvassing comes from 2 years helping lead our summer canvas operation as well as a handful of canvassing shifts in Kentucky for various different Senate races throughout the years. And also just want to note that we can only fit so much of canvassing education into 45 minutes to an hour of essentially basic educational get out the vote canvassing things. But if you want more specifics, certainly stick around to join the VPIRG Votes and Vermont Conservation Voters canvassing tour Zoom immediately following this call. Um, but moving on, now that you all have had some practice drafting your personal story about why you're canvassing in this moment, I really want to discuss how to weave that story into each and every interaction you have at the door in a way that feels both natural, and is really quite proven to get folks to connect with you. So the close method is a great place to start for learning how to uh, lack of better words, bob and weave in a conversation, if you will. And it's also okay to repeat this method more than once in a conversation. In fact, we recommend that you use the close method every time you ask a question or make an ask of a person while you're at their door. So it's really a repetitive tool. And the first one is quite serious. Close your mouth after your first ask. And really, I know it kind of sounds a little bit rude, but one of the greatest tools in our canvassing toolbox is to remember this is a two-sided conversation happening. And if you or I were to do all the talking, um, you may talk someone out of supporting your campaign. And so, really, rule of thumb, once you make your first ask in a conversation at the door or your first question, take a pause, catch a breath, listen to what their response is, which really leads us into the second part of that acronym, listening actively. So if someone isn't immediately on board, right, they haven't been to a protest or they're not, you know, aligned with the campaign immediately or haven't heard about it already, maybe they're giving you less than ideal feedback, maybe even somewhat of an objection to what you're saying. We want to identify and figure out what their objection specifically is. Is the objection to your campaign as a whole? Is it maybe a small portion of your pitch? Maybe they didn't like the angle you came at this issue from. Um, is the timing not great maybe for this person to get involved, though they might be interested, right? Really trying to break down this idea of black and white, either you're with us or you're against it, right? We're all human. We all have come into conversations with all sorts of emotions and experiences and really trying to understand what at the heart of their objection or hesitance is can really help us have a more productive conversation at the door. So identifying why someone says no to you or isn't an immediate yes at the door is key in deciding where to take your conversation to. Or maybe, unfortunately, understanding if your time is better spent at a different door, right? Canvassing, we want to be as efficient as possible and pass along the message of our campaign or effort as frequently as possible. And standing at a door arguing with someone is not a great way to pass that message along. Which leads us into the next focus of close, which is asking open-ended questions. So if someone doesn't give you a clear answer on whether they're with you on your campaign or issue or not, you want to really make sure you ask a refocusing question first, such as, would you say you're with us on these issues? Or would you agree that you believe in X, Y, Z, for example? So always ask that refocusing question first. If folks say no to that sort of broad question, then they're not likely to support your work or your effort. And that's a great sign we've identified that you can begin to make your exit from that door politely, obviously, leaving their property or their apartment step. But if they agree to those initial questions, then they'll usually say a bit more, which is when you would kind of loop back in the first part of close, closing your mouth and listening to what they're saying. Um, and then from their answer, you want to transition to speaking from the heart and retargeting, right? So connect personally in that moment. This is where your story really comes into play. In short, why are you at their door at this hour making this ask? What does it mean for you? What is personally at stake? Communicating those, being a human to human in these interactions are key, right? And then once you've made that connection that, hey, we're both humans here, we have emotions and I feel strongly about this. Then after you have that understanding, you can go ahead and dive into connecting your campaign or effort. Um, because sometimes if you just immediately start with the here's the campaign and I don't know you yet, right? They might put up defensive boundaries, right? That might be very strong language, intimidating language. And so really putting them at ease in the interaction is the goal of connecting personally. But when you get to the connecting the campaign and the effort, how does a campaign seek to fix your issues, help your neighbors, or benefit the greater good? This is the moment you reconnect your maybe off-topic conversation if you were getting to know them for longer than you would like. Back to that topic you want to talk about, right? The reason you're at their door. Um, and to do that, you want to provide context for the moment you're in. Not everybody is as tuned into politics or the issue you're working on as yourself. So really being clear and transparent on how this effort or the person at the door support might help your issue. Thinking big picture, for example, that's great to hear. You know, I attended the No Kings 3 rally back in March. It was so incredible to see the amount of people power that is out there and ready to come together. Every protest, more people are showing up, and that has real impact. You know, they say you need 3.5% of the population to make real change, and we are getting closer to that number every day. When everyone's who's with us gets involved today, we can win. We can, you know, do X, Y, Z and take on these issues. Um, and so once you've connected, provided context, you've spoken from the heart, you've connected both as humans and you've connected the work you're doing, and you understand this person a little bit better, you want to make sure to make the exact right ask. So after you've done a few moments of getting to know this person, you will be much more aware of what their capacity is to support this campaign or this effort, this issue. Maybe they mentioned that they might have a financial hardship right now. They that might not make them a great candidate to ask for financial support to your campaign, but maybe they would love to organize rides for folks in their neighborhood to the polls or help make phone calls twice a week for the campaign. Um, and this is sort of to reiterate, this brings back in that goal of identifying what they're saying no to, right? To ensure that you're not leaving something at the door. Like maybe they would have made phone calls once a week, but we weren't curious enough to understand where they were coming at this conversation from. Um, you, in just sort of to wrap up there, using your intuition and context in the moment is really kind of the last thought I would like to leave here with on this slide. It'll help you more accurately target this resident's capacity to help out the movement. Um, and that's what I have to say about the close method. If there are any questions for that, feel free to drop them in the chat. But I'm going to move us along so that Ford can talk to us about interruptions and how to handle those.
Okay. So you might be the perfect canvasser. You know, you can go through the close method like a canvassing pro. You can have an awesome personal story, and you're going to get interrupted. It's going to happen, and that's okay. Your job isn't to force every conversation into the same script. If you're doing that, you're doing something wrong. It's to listen, build rapport, and find opportunities to connect what they're saying back to the purpose of the conversation. So on this slide, we're going to walk through just a few of the tools that you can use to do this, to keep conversations moving while staying genuine to the person that you're speaking to. So starting with rapport and momentum, when we handle an interruption, um, these are the two things that we want to build on when we're talking to the person. With rapport, uh, knowing who we are as canvassers, it creates trust. You know, if they trust us, us being the physical representation of that campaign to them at this moment, they're going to be much more willing to support our cause, to get involved, um, to not be afraid to take a moment or two to try to get to. So, yeah, don't be afraid to take a moment or two to try to get to know that person as a human, not just another potential supporter. Just to reiterate that point, people can tell the difference when you treat them one way versus the other when you're just reading off of a script. Sharing your personal story is super helpful with this. Be sure to let the person at the door respond to your story as well. The more back and forth you have, the more connected with the campaign this person is likely going to be. And remember that our goal when someone interrupts is to smoothly address their question or concern, but ultimately tie that back to the wrap. And then with momentum, like the more that someone says yes to us, the more likely they are to say yes to us again. Get that foot in the door, build from yes to yes. We call that the theory of yeses, to get farther along in the conversation and eventually to the ask. You don't have to start with the ask, you can build to that point. And then while you're doing this, practice active listening. Figure out if they're objecting, figure out what the exact nature of that objection is. Again, where they're coming from. Isolate that emotional root. So, for example, like if they bring up the concern about, let's say, the impact of a price on carbon pollution and what that would have on low-income Vermonters, then at the root of that are concerns about equity and care for those that are most vulnerable, and we can build off of that, right? That's a shared value. And part of that active listening is acknowledgement of what they're saying and connecting personally. So again, just demonstrate that you're listening by acknowledging their concern. It can be as simple as, I hear you, right? That goes a long way. Find a bit of your personal story. Maybe you've told it, maybe you haven't, that connects with that same emotional root that the person has expressed to you. And then always try to connect the campaign to what they're discussing too, right? Let them know what the campaign, the issue that you're talking about has done to address those concerns that they're bringing up. So for example, right, like climate change is going to impact every Vermonter and every aspect of our livelihoods. We need to address the crisis and to do it correctly and create solutions that actually benefit Vermonters. To make sure that happens, we need more folks to get involved and ensuring that elected officials are working towards the best solutions. VCV works closely with legislators in Montpelier to ensure that they have climate on their mind when writing policy. And then as the conversation goes on, it's going to ebb, it's going to flow. But your job is to try to focus it and pivot it back to the goal of your ask, right? So asking a focusing question can be really helpful here to clear up whether that person is with us on this issue. Again, back to the theory of yeses. So something as simple as, would you say you're with us on this issue? If you haven't gotten through your whole personal story, your whole rap yet, you can just go back to where you left off um, and pick up from there if you can do it in a smooth way that works with the conversation. Don't just pick back up like a robot and you haven't actually heard what they're saying or responded to it. Um, yeah, like language like I hear you, which is why we've been working on X. Um, and then if you've already gone through your rap, like build momentum to get to the ask. Sometimes people will say one objection when they're operating off of a different one. Like obvious example, if someone says they're busy when you knock at the door, that they might be busy. They might also just not be interested. But people who are uninterested in talking to us, like we know that they still need to be engaged on the issues that we're working on. This is really important stuff. So to use like a VPIRG example, right, like as the largest advocacy nonprofit operating in the state house on these issues, we're going to be influencing state policy next legislative session that will affect your everyday life. And it's critical Vermonters know what, why, and how. And then in an ideal situation, hopefully they're so impressed by your passion that they'll want to get involved at some level. And even if they are kind of shooing you off, if they look uninterested, like there's ways to still get through it. Like you can offer to keep it brief. I'll give you the short version. Um, Granted, our pitches are already pretty brief, concise, and it can feel even more so if you inflect it in the right way. Um, so in this situation, you can just pick up the pace, try to make it seem like you're not rushing, or if it makes sense, you can cut certain bits and get to the point. If it becomes clear that there is no common ground, just don't spend extra time there. Um, you're busy, we have more doors, so are they. Get to the point. And then the word but, right? The word but makes our mind reject what was said before. So it's helpful to not use them when possible. Like when it comes to making people feel like you're hearing and addressing their concerns, a better word to use is and. And you're going to notice that in almost every situation that you're in, when you could say but, you could also say and. So say and. Positive interruptions. Um, a really common interruption that you're going to get when someone's like with you. People will be agree with us and they'll have something that they want to add or some personal anecdote to share. And this is awesome, right? This is a rapport builder. You can celebrate internally in your head the fact that they're with us on these issues, and you can build off of that, but let them finish their thought. Don't be so excited that you jump in and cut them off and break that momentum, break that rapport. Um, this is going to be helpful to you when you bring that conversation kind of back into the flow. Um, and lastly, like some people you meet at the door, they will be or they'll act rushed. And don't worry. Don't worry if someone doesn't have the time to talk to you right now. Um, there's ways to work around that time constraint, like we mentioned earlier. The wrap is pretty brief. This will just take a minute, or I can be super brief for you. Um, or I'll be back in this area in an hour, or until 8. And I'll be happy to come back a little later when works better for you. Um, Using assumptive language really helps. Like, for example, like we're happy to come back a little later instead of saying, is it okay if we come back later? And then like last but not least, like folks don't think they have enough time often, but they can usually spare 5 minutes for a quick, important conversation, especially if you, as the messenger, are concise and compelling, like we know you can be.
All right, I think it's back up to me. So let's go ahead and put some of this into practice. Now, earlier we decided that numerous small breakout groups might be a bit too logistically complicated for our small team. So instead, we're going to start with a quick Canvas interaction demo with Josh and Ford, and then we'll see if anyone would like to share their story, either in the chat or on camera and unmuted. No pressure either way, but you will have the opportunity if you'd like it. But Josh and Ford, why don't you kick us off first?
Sure thing. And okay, folks, in this demonstration, Ford is going to be acting as the person being canvassed, and I will play the role of the canvasser. And just a heads up, in case it's not clear, we are not by any means professional or even recreational actors. While we certainly try our best, it might not quite be an Oscar-winning performance. And for clarity, this is a broken down version of our Democracy Vermont summer canvas door wrap, which has bits and pieces of my personal story woven into it. And so without further ado, 40, are you ready?
Yes, I'm a character.
Okay, okay. Hi, hey, how's it going? I'm Josh with VPIRG, and I'm curious, sir, do you think our democracy is better off now than it was 2 years ago?
Hey, Josh, how's it going? Uh, I'm not sure. Like maybe it's better, maybe it's not, but probably not, right? I mean, like to be honest with you, I want to be honest, like I'm mostly in the same boat as I was 2 years ago. Like in my experience, kind of rarely impacts me personally, politics that is. Like I know that my electricity bill is more expensive than it was. I know that I'm paying more for my weekly grocery, but that's always been the case. It's inflation. That doesn't mean that they're not counting my vote or that like our democracy is in trouble. Sometimes I feel like this is all overblown. Like this is why I avoid the news. I just can't do it. Like we're resilient. We've been here for 250 years. I think we proved that we kind of know what we're doing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Ford, that honestly sounds so familiar to my own experience in life. Growing up, I was sold the idea that if I worked hard enough, got through school with a degree, and then once again worked hard enough for the rest of my life, I'd be rewarded with that financial security and being able to maybe raise a family, own a decent car, and enjoy that good old American dream. However, that dream really came crashing down for me when I learned that my schools weren't safe from gun violence, or when I learned that what it felt like to break my grocery budget, what I still feels like when I break my grocery budget month after month, what it felt like to see my community be devastated each year from whatever climate crisis occurred. Meanwhile, my parents and family members struggle to afford retirement or health care. And really, to sum up the past 2 years, especially here in Vermont, but nationally speaking, we've seen cuts to healthcare, environmental protections, disaster relief. We've seen the cost of living continue to rise while our president focuses on enriching his own family and leading us into unauthorized wars. We've also seen direct attacks here in our own communities, including the kidnapping of our neighbors. So Vermont is certainly not immune to this recklessness, cruelty, and corruption, resilient as it may be. And everyday Vermonters are like yourself and myself are feeling those impacts. And what I know is that no matter how resilient we might be, we deserve better and we can do better as well. So, Ford, I'm wondering, hearing those concerns, hearing what's going on in the country, what is most worrying to you these days out of those issues? And also, have you thought about getting involved in your local community or at the state level working on these issues?
Wow. Well, first off, thank you for sharing those concerns with me. That's a lot to think about, honestly. Wow. I mean, I've never got involved in my community politically, so I don't know if I've, thought through these issues with the same level of depth and care that you have. I mean, like I go to the farmers market on Wednesday nights. I've gone to a couple town hall meetings over the years when, there's something I care about, which isn't too often, to be honest. But I like even when you're speaking out, like it all just feels overwhelming. Politics feels overwhelming to me. Like it's easier, I think it's easier to let people like you that are clearly dedicated and passionate handle it.
Well, first of all, Ford, thank you. And also, I totally get where you're coming from. I've been in similar situations emotionally, especially over the past few years, seeing so much happen outside of my control, which initially caused me to just sort of shelter in place, if you will. I didn't try to affect too much of my community, but ultimately, I realized that I needed to start looking for positive ways to pour my energy into advocacy and into my community. I realized even if I didn't understand or like politics, politics cares about me, and if I don't stand up for my beliefs, I'm kind of resigning to accept the cards I get dealt. And this is why I decided to volunteer for VPIRG on the Democracy Vermont campaign, which is a vibrant, organized movement committed to standing up to these attacks. With the help of our members, we've pushed for dozens of bills to proactively protect Vermonters' rights, our health, wallets, and environment. We also mobilize thousands of Vermonters across the state for rallies, town meetings, major protests, efforts that really show that Vermont will not stand idly by while our values are being trampled on. And for the main point is that people like me really do truly depend on the involvement of people like yourself to stand up and care for these issues publicly. Without the backing of folks like yourself, we have no power at all. Meanwhile, the wealthiest Americans and corporate interests with deep pockets depend on you feeling like you can't get involved or that you don't know what to do, which is why I'm here today asking you if you feel like you can sign our voter pledge today, affirming your plans to vote in the upcoming election, and if you feel so called after our conversation, to join me in knocking doors, maybe writing letters or even talking with your neighbors about what's at stake. So this conversation doesn't just end here, that it can become larger and more people can get involved. Can I count on you, Ford?
Yeah, yeah, Josh, that sounds good. You can count on me. I'll sign.
Perfect. Just sign right here, and if I could have your phone number, we'll make that happen. Perfect. Okay, and scene. Thank you all. Um, and that was just like that. I've had dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of conversations across Vermont that span just that length. And Ford and I connected as humans. I tied that back into the campaign effort I was knocking his door for. And ultimately, at least made Ford feel a little bit more hopeful of about what was happening, and maybe he'll go to that farmers market or town meeting a little bit more frequently, or maybe we'll even knock doors with me next week. Who knows? Um, but I'm sure you could tell a little bit of where my personal story came into that. Um, and at this point, I would love to sh open up the conversation to folks and see if anybody else feels brave enough to come off mute. If you want, please put your name down in the chat and sort of raising your hand that way, and I will give you permission to speak if you want to share your story um, that we took a few minutes to write a few minutes ago. Oh, yeah, Jordan.
So I'm not volunteering to share my story just yet, but I do see that we have a story in the chat from Jean from earlier that I would be happy to read. And I also just want to say 10 out of 10 performance to both of you. Excellent job. That was so much fun to watch. Okay, so here is what Jean has to say. Hi, neighbor. I'm Jean, and I'm out canvassing today to remind people to vote November 3rd. With so much happening in Washington, and our state, it's important to use our voices and to be heard. So, very short and sweet and to the point.
Yeah. Thank you, Jordan, and especially thank you, Jean. If anybody feels like they don't want to necessarily come off of mute, feel free to put your story in the chat. And if not, I might make a special ask of Jordan to be brave and share hers. But I'll give you all maybe another 10 or 15 seconds if you want to raise your hand or comment. Okay, seeing no brave souls just yet, Jordan, would you just give us one more example before we move on?
Yeah, happy to give you my short little example. Okay. Hi there, my name is Jordan, and I'm here today to talk to you about the midterm elections. I'm doing this because my family has been living here in the Northeast Kingdom since the late 1800s, and I have a strong attachment to this place and the people who live here. As a democracy organizer and campaign director, I'm passionate about getting out the vote to make sure everyone's voices are heard. Midterm voter turnout is always especially low, and I want to make sure that I do all that I can to encourage folks to exercise these hard fought voting rights. I'm hoping you'll make a plan to vote on or before Election Day on November 3rd, and I can help you do that if you'd like. So, can I count on you to cast your ballot? And that's it.
Whew. Okay, well, thank you, Jordan, for being so brave. I'm going to throw it back over to you to moderate us through the rest of this.
All right. And actually, it's back to Ford, I think. Or is this you, Josh?
I think it might be me. Oops,
Okay,
maybe I should have just taken the lead there. But
that's fine.
um, so I now want to talk about maybe the more serious side of canvassing, right? Because you're putting yourself out into a community. If you don't know who lives there, or maybe exactly where you are, geographically speaking, and from the past 40 odd years of canvassing, we've come up with a couple of pro tips at VPIRG on how to ensure that you keep yourself safe, you know how to manage your day, and how to get out of maybe some sticky situations should they arise. But I first want to talk about exiting an uncomfortable situation, which does happen. And if you feel nervous at someone's door or on a street or something, here are a few ways to set yourself up for a quick departure. Um, so, rule of thumb for me personally, after I knock on someone's door, I either take a couple of steps off of their porch or I move down a few sets of stairs, creating a safe space for myself, but also for the person who's taking a chance opening the door to a stranger of about 5, maybe 8 feet, whatever feels safest and more comfortable for myself. Um, Also, as I'm walking up to someone's door to knock, I'm taking mental notes of the exits out of someone's yard or the if there are any high steps on someone's front porch if I need to make a quick exit out of this person's property. I already have sort of a game plan of how to navigate that situation should it come to that. Um, And a couple of sayings I found that help exiting situations could be things like, okay, well, heard that. I have to go talk to your neighbors now. Thanks so much. Have a good day. And you just leave. You just walk away. Or, if you're volunteering or doing any paid canvassing, you can say, as a policy, we're not allowed to go into people's homes. In Vermont, folk are friendly in every corner of the state, and sometimes people want to invite you indoors for a cup of tea or a snack or something like that. But if you feel uncomfortable, we advise our canvassers never to go inside someone's home unless they feel extremely comfortable doing so. Um, and another example of exiting a situation, something you could say is, we're looking for folks that want to get involved in this moment. No worries if that's not you. Thank you for your time. I'm gonna head on my way right now. And also remembering that most of human communication happens non-verbally. So making sure that your body language is speaking as if you are leaving. So starting to turn away, keeping that distance from the door. Um, Maybe not opening yourself up in a warm, welcoming manner as much. But moving on, I definitely want to talk about trusting your gut versus your implicit bias for a second, because this is something that is natural for folks when you're in an uncomfortable or new situation. And part of situational awareness is trusting that gut feeling. Um, so when I say that gut feeling, right? If you walk up onto someone's property or you're approaching someone and you start to get a real nagging feeling in the back of your head, like this doesn't feel quite right. Um, or maybe you see something about a house, maybe it's a flag or a sign or something like that, or a threatening posture or angry dog, especially taking into account folks of varying identities. It's realistic to think that some situations could result in an unsafe situation, and we encourage folks to first check any implicit biases that might exist. So asking yourself, why is this house making me uncomfortable? Again, much like identifying the emotional root for someone saying no in the close method, um, identifying within yourself why you feel uncomfortable. Second, if those initial judgments are factors that don't necessarily implicate a dangerous situation, in our canvassing experience, maybe someone has a rusted out car in their front yard, or a pile of metal or overflowing trash that maybe are just a little bit out of place. But don't necessarily speak to danger. We encourage folks to continue and knock through that moment, right? But if the reason for your hesitation could reasonably result in a dangerous situation, such as a racist sign or a flag that is associated with movements that aren't accepting of other cultures or identities, please do skip that door. Ultimately, your organizer, your canvassing organizer, and your party should trust your judgment on door-to-door safety moments. And another important thing is understanding the organizer's end-of-day canvassing protocols. So a couple of questions to keep in mind. What are the organizer's expectations for the end of this canvassing shift? Are they picking me up from the field, from the neighborhood? What exactly is that plan? Where do I need to be and when do I need to be there? And if you are being picked up by somebody to end your canvassing shift, do you have that person's contact information? Another couple of key questions to ask when you're going into a canvassing experience, should you expect a thing such as a debrief at the end of the shift? Do you need to be collecting any information specifically that you need to report back at the end of the shift, right? Or are you knocking 40 doors and then you're walking on home? Being clear on what those expectations are can really help you plan and organize for your day and keep yourself safe. Um, and then just the last few general canvassing safety guidelines. Go canvassing with a fully charged phone. You would be surprised how many canvassers I have seen come to canvass for VPIRG and their phones at 10%, and we won't have a way to contact them at 8 p.m. when we need to identify where they're at. Or better yet, spend a few minutes at the start of your shift getting to know your turf. We'll define that term in a moment. On your Maps app on your phone or on a physical map if you prefer. Really getting to know the roadways and maybe if there's a library down the street or a gas station you can get some water at, things like that. Safe points, if you will. And then another tip that I would advise folks to take is if you have a crew of folks you're working with that day, share your location on either Find My Friends on iPhone or Life 360 is another great location sharing app. Um, Also tell folks who aren't canvassing when you plan to be back from your shift that day, right? Accountability is a long goes a long way when you're preparing for your safety. And then stick to that plan. Lastly, oh, not lastly, the obvious one here would be drinking water before, during, and after canvassing, especially in the summer months. The sun can get pretty hard to handle at some points during the day. Okay. All right. Then lastly, not lastly, two more things I want to talk about are de-escalation tactics as well as harder situations crash course really quick. So de-escalation, sometimes folks we meet at the door do not like what we're knocking for and they react uh, or present as aggressive or extremely rude. And so taking these listed steps to de-escalate the conversation are essential to remain safe and while on your turf. So the first rule of thumb is to stay calm and respectful. So you're representing an organization and also you don't want to escalate the situation. So always keep a professional and calm demeanor. If an individual becomes aggressive, it is often safest to leave immediately without engaging further. Sure, say thank you, have a great day, but priority number one, get yourself out of that environment. And then reframing your language, right? Using softer phrases as opposed to maybe more aggressive if you like. So things such as we may see things differently, but I understand where you're coming from. Or validating language, saying interesting perspective there. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Acknowledging viewpoints that you might not agree with, but you don't want to straight up say that's wrong in that moment. And then resisting impulses. So pause and refocus on understanding rather than winning the conversation. We don't want to be arguing with people. We want to find folks who are available and ready to buy into our movement. And then being aware of your body language and tone, using nodding and like, oh yeah, I hear that kind of body language in a calm tone to reinforce the respect you have for that person. Um, and then lastly, using bridging statements. So saying things such as, we both want what's best for our community, even if they're different ideas. That can help calm the person down and acknowledge your similarities. Um, okay, on to harder situations. So sometimes people are aggressive when they don't know who is on their property. Sometimes all it takes is a friendly smile, a wave, and announcing who you are can help clear confusion and help that person understand that they're not in danger. It also helps if you're going to walk onto someone's property, feeling confident about what you're doing and in the effort you're engaging in. So saying, "Hey there, I'm a canvasser with VPIRG," as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Um, if the homeowner still does not appreciate you being there, don't worry, they will make that very clear. Feel free to say, "I'll be on my way. Sorry, I didn't mean to upset you." Um, and then rarely, individuals may intimidate with physical threats. And if this happens, this is an immediate just leave, period, situation. And so another note that I would add is that if you experience hostility or aggression on a canvassing operation, you should notify the canvas organizer, fill out maybe an incident report or other ways the organizer may have to document extremely negative, unsafe, or harmful interactions at the door. Um, yeah, and with that, I'm going to throw it over to Ford.
Okay, folks, let's talk about turf management. So first things first, let's define turf. In the canvassing world, turf refers to the geographical area that you have been assigned to canvass on any specific day. Uh, with a power hour, jump in there. It's like the hour or two that people are most likely to be home in any given day in any given area. This is when you want to be hitting your stride in your canvassing shift. And it's going to be located in the most densely populated portion of your turf, like probably Vermont, like right in the downtown kind of area. Um, as for when this is, if it's a work day, Monday through Thursday, Power hour is usually between 6 to 8 p.m. That's when folks are coming home from work. So they're going to be there. If you try to go in the middle of the day, chances are you're not going to have much luck. But during the weekend, power hour is likely to be during the early midday hours. So like 12 to 3 p.m. or around there. This is important to mention because when you're planning your day, you want to be feeling comfortable with your wrap in the area with the highest concentration of doors and just being the best mix of energized and comfortable with the neighborhood you're in during that power hour. Um, you also want to move quickly between doors. This really does matter. Like if you spend 10 minutes at every door versus 5 minutes, it's double the amount of doors you're getting to. If you get distracted, petting the cats, picking flowers between homes, you're going to drastically lower the amount of doors that you can knock on. That's just a fact. I like cats too. I know it's hard. It's okay to take breaks, and it's okay to chat with neighbors or pet the occasional cat that you see. But too many distractions can pile up, can add on quickly, and that just means that there's fewer folks in the neighborhood that are getting to know you, that are getting to know the campaign. So we try to avoid that. Productive conversations. Again, like building momentum and rapport is awesome. It's great. It's also really important to stay mostly on topic, right? So we need to balance building rapport and talking to new people to get them involved. If it becomes clear that someone is only looking to argue, if they're keeping you out their door just to argue, just to disagree, or if there just is no common ground, it's okay to wrap up the conversation and move on. Never argue with people. You're representative of the campaign that you're working on. Your time is best spent with people who are supportive of the issues that we're working on. Just need to learn more, need to learn new ways to get involved. While it can be productive to discuss the campaign and work with someone who's on the fence, having an outright argument for 30 minutes with someone at their door doesn't reflect well upon the character of your campaign, and it could possibly mobilize someone in opposition of your campaign. And that's working in the negative. That's not what we're trying to do. Research shows that arguing with someone who's made up their mind in a position, it rarely works to convince them to leave their ideology and adopt yours. So it's in the best interest of your mission to move along and continue to identify supporters in the area that you're at. And then you want to canvas your turf 2 times in one shift. Ideally, the organizer for your canvas or shift has like sized your turf so that's possible to walk through and knock on every door, have several conversations, and with the remaining time, once you've completed that first round of going through your turf, then you can swing back and knock on the doors that didn't answer the first time around. Um, this is really effective strategy. It can lead to a lot of additional conversations and new interactions. Um, and it's one of the strategies that I know for VPIRG has made their summer canvas so crazy effective. However, if you're managing a large turf, and the goal is just to cover ground, canvas as you normally would for that first 30 to 60 minutes. Take a mental note of how far along in your assigned area you've gotten and adjust your pacing and length of conversations to match your goals for the canvassing shift. And last but not at all least, come prepared to canvas. Yes, that means coming with your story. It means coming with clothes, knowing these kind of foundational skills. But also, it's important to be ready to canvas, like no matter the environment, rain or shine, for like to make you comfortable. So like bring bottled water, bring a snack or two. You're going to be out there most of the day, all day. Could be hot, could be raining, could be cold. Be prepared. Bring an energy drink, a coffee, shoes appropriate for the weather, so on, so on. Um, like I will always bring my rain jacket in my backpack, no matter the weather report, sometimes an umbrella too. Um, and a backpack it's ideal for canvassing. Again, you're living out of that bag for a day. It's less awkward, the backpack, to carry than a tote bag for long periods of time. You don't want a tote bag on your shoulder all day walking around a neighborhood. It's going to get really tiring. Um, and a backpack can hold as much as your typical purse too. And that's it for this slide. Jordan, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, well, we are nearly at time, and that's all we've got for this webinar. But if you're interested in learning more about VPIRG and VCV's candidate endorsement process and the unveiling of our Fall Get Out the Vote volunteer Canvas tour, then you should definitely hop into this next Zoom call starting at around 7 p.m. But we'll start a few minutes late to make sure that folks can join from this call to that one. So you can find the link to that call on this photo here on this QR code, and I'm also going to pop it in the chat right now so you can access that pretty easily. So take a second to check that out if you're interested. And if your evening with us does end here, you can find our contact info on the screen. We'll hang here for a bit to answer any questions you might have either about the call we just had or the call that we're getting over to next. So thank you all for joining us tonight, whatever you choose to do after this call. I hope you learned some new tips and tricks as we approach the November election. Thanks again.